question of justice. 35 years ago, Bill Macumber went to prison for the double murder of 2 young adults in Arizona. All the evidence in the crime, even fingerprints, pointed to him. But then, shocking new evidence emerged, indicating that Macumber may have been framed by his own wife while they were locked in an ugly divorce. Now, the couple's son wants his ailing father freed. Dan Harris follows the case all the way to the governor's office. Nightline investigates.
I want her to know who I am. I want her to know I'm Bill Macumber's son.
Ron Kempfert is a son engaged in a desperate battle with 2 forceful women, the governor of Arizona and his own mother. This is a fight over the fate of Ron's father, Bill Macumber, imprisoned for 35 years.
This is the house I grew up in. Spent the first 7 years of my life here.
Ron spent most of his life believing his father was a monster.
What types of things did your mother say about him?
He's a murderer. He's a manipulator. He uses people. That he didn't care about us, only cared about himself.
His father was convicted in the 1970s of killing 2 young adults and leaving their bodies in the middle of the Arizona desert. But several years ago, a phone call that changed Ron's life, a conversation with an attorney for the Arizona Justice Project, which works to free innocent inmates.
He said, I don't know how to tell you this. He says, no other way to tell you this. We think your father's innocent, and we're pretty sure your mom framed him for it.
The attorney on the line was Larry Hammond.
There's no doubt in your mind that she did this?
No, there's no doubt that she was involved in doing it.
It took some time, but Ron ultimately came to believe this story.
I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I love my mother, but I don't like her. She is not a nice person. And I did not make that jump immediately. But I don't have any doubt anymore that my mom did this, that my mom framed my dad for the murders.
At the time of the arrest, Bill and Carol Macumber's marriage was falling apart. Carol was working at the local sheriff's office, where she had access to the evidence in the murders and had recently taken classes in lifting fingerprints.
How do you get across to yourself that your mother is capable of this, that she framed your own father for a murder, that he'd been in prison for 35 years now, well, 35 years now, for something he didn't do because she was going to lose what she had.
Did you frame your husband?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
We tracked down Carol Kempfert in Olympia, Washington. She agreed to grant her first and only television interview.
I didn't wake up one morning and say, oh, gee, I think I'll go frame my husband today. I did not, and I will say this again, I did not manufacture, nor did I ever tamper with evidence, ever. And I passed 4 polygraphs, and I'll be happy to take another. But I did not tamper with any evidence.
She says she remembers her husband coming home the night of the murders with his clothing covered in blood, and that he later confessed to her as their marriage was disintegrating.
To some ears, I would imagine it might sound a little far-fetched. I mean, here's a guy with no history of violence who allegedly kills 2 people he doesn't know in the desert and then confesses to you in the middle of a divorce. Doesn't that sound all when you compile it that way? It
sounds ridiculous, but that's in fact what happened.
The notion that your son, who I would presume knows you, would say that you're capable of acting in such a diabolical fashion, that's kind of, it's a damning statement.
Ron, oh boy, I don't know if I want to get into this. Ron always has been a follower.
You saying he's gullible?
Critical thinking is not one of Ron's better skills. What can I say? And if anyone was ever made for Bill to mold and manipulate, it'd be Ron.
She's saying that you have always had a tendency to be a little bit gullible, and that your father is a manipulator, and that he's manipulating you into believing this.
Okay, let's say I am gullible, and my father is manipulating me. Please explain to me how he's manipulating the Arizona Justice Project and everybody else who believes in his innocence and is fighting to get him out.
Another group that believes Bill Macumber's story, the Arizona Clemency Board, which last year, in a rare move, unanimously recommended his sentence be commuted, saying, quote, an injustice has been done in Mr. Macumber's case, and that his wife had, quote, the motive, means, and opportunity to falsely pin the murders on Mr. Macumber. The board pointed out that another man, Ernesto Valenzuela, allegedly confessed that he had done the murders, something the jury was never allowed to hear, and that Bill Macumber had an exemplary record in prison. In fact, Macumber would have been eligible for parole 10 years ago if he'd agreed to confess his guilt, but he refused.
He would rather die in prison than say he committed a crime he didn't commit. To look at this case and say that this is a man who ought to stay in prison, to me, it ceased being rational a long time ago.
After the clemency board voted, Ron Kempfert was briefly optimistic. But then the case went to the governor of Arizona, Republican Jan Brewer. You may know her from her support of Arizona's controversial immigration legislation or from her famous freeze-up during a recent gubernatorial debate. Governor Brewer rejected the recommendation from the clemency board whose members she appointed.
We were devastated. I was angry. We were making all the plans for him to come home.
Ron Kempfert and his father's many supporters believe the governor fears looking soft on crime in the middle of an election campaign.
And we will have sweet, sweet victory.
So we took Ron to confront Governor Brewer.
I've written her 3 times. I haven't gotten a response yet.
But we were turned away.
But unfortunately, she's in back-to-back meetings all day.
Governor, my name is Dan Harris. I'm from ABC News.
We then decided to show up unannounced at one of Governor Brewer's news conferences.
You won't answer anybody's questions as to why. I've sent your office 2 emails and a letter, no response. We've all been asking why. Why won't you release him?
Well, you know, it's an unfortunate situation that governors have to make difficult decisions, regardless of what recommendations are made to them. And I know it's hard as a child that you're faced with this in your lifetime, but he was found guilty by 2 different juries, and I feel very comfortable with my decision. I appreciate your concerns, but I have made my decision, and it's final.
All righty, guys, we are done today.
This is your executive clemency board, Governor. This is your board.
Thank you all very much.
Why wouldn't you follow the recommendation of your own board, Governor?
At first, no response. I had to ask twice.
You have no second thoughts, given that it's your board that recommended it?
I commented on it.
Is there a political motive here on your part?
Absolutely.
Desire not to look soft on crime, per se?
Absolutely not.
How you doing?
I am unbelievably angry. She just ran away moment it got tough. It's the same statement we've been hearing from her office for a year now.
Ron is a man now carrying incalculable anger not only at the governor of Arizona, but also at his mother, who, in our interview, offered these conciliatory words.
I'm sure Ron will see this, and if he does, I want him to know that even though bridges may never be mended, I really wish him and his family well. I really do.
Oh, that's a first. My mother's never been supportive of my family. And for her to say that to me is laughable. I'm sorry, I cannot accept that.
With neither the governor nor his mother showing any signs of relenting, Ron and his father's legal team are now exploring other options for securing Bill Macumber's release. But the options are limited, and given the poor state of Bill Macumber's health, time may be limited too. For Nightline, this is Dan Harris in Phoenix, Arizona.